Hello everyone, this is Paul with rcFoamFighters. This is basically just going to be a video to cover the building of the new FF-117V2 50mm and 70mm EDF jets. So the plans are now available on our website. They are for sale for $6 usual price, but on the release I'm going to have them on sale for 1 week for $1.50, along with all the other plans on the site. They'll also be on sale for $1.50 each. Okay, let's start getting into the build. First thing you're going to need to do is print out the plans for whichever version you have, the 50mm or 70mm. One real important note, make sure that you print to actual size or 100%. Make sure it's not set to fit to page or something like that, because it might skew the scale or how it's printed out. Okay, in the plan set we do have a bunch of details, basic stuff about the plane. Has some of the weight and average top speed as tested by rcFoamFighters, all weight, the wingspan length, just basically on that detail. There's another page that has some information about the proper CG settings. Again, some more information about the power setups you can do, and also there's basic information for aileron and elevator throws on this page. Again, this is a starting point for these elevator and aileron throws. Everybody has their kind of own way of flying and how they like the plane set up. So again, this is just a starting point, so take a look at that before you get the plane out to fly. There's also a typical key plan included in the plans for the guys doing the tiled set. Shows how it'll fit together on the foam board. This is the example of the 50mm. It's going to take 5 sheets of foam board. The 70mm plane is going to take 6 sheets of foam board because it is bigger. And there's also another detail in there that kind of shows the assembly method of the main wing, because this one is a little more complicated. It's basically stacked, with the bottom plate, 2 riser plates, the main wing, and then the KF airfoils. So that'll help you kind of visualize before you start gluing everything together. Okay, before you get into the build, this is just some of the basic stuff you're going to need to build the plane. Again, make sure you have a nice supply of blades for your cutting knife, whatever cutting knife you're using. I'm using just kind of your typical utility knife that you can find at Home Depot, Lowe's, or any hardware store. Also X-Acto knife. Again, make sure you have plenty of sharp blades. And then I'm going to be using some 5-minute epoxy to glue certain parts together, like the KF airfoil and our plates for the main wing. I like the way it goes on a lot thinner than using hot glue, and gives you a little time to work with it. Again, hot glue gun, basic tape. And if you guys don't have one of these, this is a foam board cutter. This thing is worth its weight in gold, basically, for builds like this. At least for me, it saves a lot of time, and you don't have to worry as much about accuracy of cutting. It's a cutter that can be placed at 45 degrees, or you can swap it around and it can do a full 90 degrees straight down cut. It's a lot easier than using, just eyeballing it with an X-Acto knife. I'll put a link to this in the video notes if anyone's interested in finding one, if you don't have one already. Now, this one's made by, what is it, FoamWerks. So again, like I said, it's definitely worth it. I forget how much it is, but it's worth its weight in gold to me. Anyway, it saves a lot of time, and it makes it easier doing all your 45-degree bevel cuts. Screwdriver, and then a couple straight edges to help you guide your cutting. Okay, if you guys are working with a tiled set of plans, first thing you're going to want to do is take each sheet, and you're going to want to cut along the blue line on the edge of it on the right side. Just cut it. And I also do a cut on the bottom side. This is going to help when you start putting together the pieces like a puzzle. There is a margin on there because not everybody has printers that can print fully to the edge, so I've tried to make it so hopefully everybody can print the plans and put them together. So basically you're going to do this with all the pages. There's quite a few pages in the set, so you just line it up with the next page and then start taping it together until you get the full set of plans. Basically that'll look like your key plan. Okay, after you have all the plans taped together, all your tiled plans, you want to go and look. There's a line that shows the edge of what the foam board would be if you put this on foam board, and basically just kind of cut out around that line so this will fit on the foam board, and we're going to tape all these plans to the foam board so we can start cutting out the parts. Okay, after you have all the plans taped down to the foam board, I've got 5 pieces of foam board with the plans on there for the 50mm. Again, the 70mm is going to take 6 pieces of foam board if you're using a 20 by 30 inch size foam board. And I did grab the black foam board so I don't have to paint it and worry about warping it like I did on that test plane. But anyway, before you start cutting out the pieces, kind of review all the notes on the plans. And on one sheet there's a legend that kind of shows you the cutting details, you know, what each line represents. This all black line, that's your cut all the way through the foam board. The blue dash line, that's usually the edge of your 45-degree bevel cuts. That can be used for single or double 45-degree bevel cuts. The green line is kind of the center line. Usually, you know, that I just cut on that line just through one side of the foam board. I'll show you that when we start cutting the parts out. And I use that as the guide to use this tool to cut the 45-degree bevels. Again, black rectangles, those are your notches. Those will be for the notches for the pieces to fit in. And then there's some lighter gray dash lines. Those are mostly just kind of note lines that will kind of show where the KF airfoil will fit or other parts like that. So let's get started. Usually what I do is I cut out, you know, kind of all the parts almost individually, a rough cut so it's easier to handle, and then I'll do the accurate cuts with the straight edge. So let's get started on that. All right, we have most of the pieces all cut down to kind of smaller, manageable sizes, easier to work with. So what I'm going to start doing now, we're going to start working on the main wing portion of the plane. As you can see in that detail that's included in the plan set, it shows the way it kind of stacks. So you want to start putting the pieces together so they look like this, and then we'll glue it all together. Okay, with each piece that you're going to cut out, you want to kind of first take a look and make note of all the line types that are on here for your bevel cuts. You know, like here's a green line for the center cut and then the edges of the bevel cut. And on this bottom piece, it's going to have this big shallow bevel cut that we'll make. Let me cut it and I'll show you the example. So first, I'm going to cut off the sides along the black line. Do it on each side. Yeah, try and make your cuts as accurate and straight as you can without, you know, really trying to rush it. As soon as you feel the blade start to like tear through the foam board, that's when you need to replace it. You know, always keep a nice sharp blade on your knife. Okay, on this piece I cut off the edges and the little thin piece that had to come out in the middle here. And next you want to logically kind of look at the way you need to cut the plan, or at least mark it for your cuts. The shallow bevel cut, what I usually do is, you know, I'll just cut off straight off on the paper. You know, only cut through the top layer of the foam board. Okay, this is going to mark it underneath, so later on we can pull off that foam board and then shape that shallow bevel cut. So, you know, you kind of logically think of how you're going to cut this so you can finish cutting the other cuts. So I cut that piece. Now next I'm just going to cut the same way for the line of the single 45-degree bevel cut here. Just cut through one side of the foam board. You know, some people don't like to cut and discard the plans. For me, it's not a big deal. You know, I'll just reprint new ones if I need to. But instead, if you wanted to, you can just kind of cut and notch, you know, on the foam board where you're going to need to do those straight cuts later. Okay, I've got the lines cut to where these shallow bevel cuts and single 45-degree bevel cuts are going to be. So now I'm just going to cut off the bottom straight edge. I'm not going to cut out the cheater hole right now. Again, that's an optional thing that you can add to the plane. So if you want the 3D printed cheater hole, you can put that in later. Or you can even just create a cheater hole just by cutting that out and putting a screen material over it. But anyway, let me cut off the bottom piece. Okay, so that's all set up now. So I don't know how good it's going to show up on camera, but I've got the lines cut. This is where the single bevel cut will go, and then this is going to be for the shallow bevel cut. So what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and peel this paper off from the shallow bevel cut. Sometimes it's a pain in the butt. It doesn't want to come off too good, like now. But anyway, you're going to peel this off, and then we'll cut down some of the foam as best we can with the knife. and then we'll use a sanding block to get it nice and smooth. Let me get this paper off, then I'll show you what I'm talking about. Alright guys, I got the paper peeled off on the areas where we're going to do that shallow bevel. Don't worry if it doesn't all come off super clean, we're going to sand it anyway. Anyway, once you get that paper off, next thing you're going to do is you're going to want to cut as much of the foam off as you can with a knife. You want to create a bevel from the edge of this down to where it starts, as close as you can with the knife. Okay, get as much foam cut off as you can with the knife. Then you're just going to come back with the sanding block and then just sand it till it's as smooth as you can get it and as straight as you can get it, to make that shallow bevel cut. Okay, I have the shallow bevels all kind of sanded down. They don't have to be super perfect because those are going to be on the inside and it's going to fold up later and glue to the bottom of the plane. So after you get those cut, what you need to do is do a single 45-degree bevel cut on this other line that we cut earlier. And this is going to allow this edge to fold. Run that 45-degree bevel cut all the way down the triangle part and down through the front of the nose where these two pieces are going to meet up later when it folds. That'll help it meet up more flushly. So do the same thing on this side, and then that piece will be done. Alright, the front portion of the main wing bottom plate is pretty much done. And what you want to do after you get these bevel cuts is kind of just do a fold, and that'll make a nice crease on the bottom side. I don't know if you can see it, but later on that's how it's going to fit on the plane. So I'm going to do the kind of the same procedure for this main wing bottom plate rear portion. It has the same bevel cuts along the edges and on the back side here, and these two little pieces that will later glue up into these corners here. So let me get all these pieces cut out. Like I said, again, we're just going to follow the same procedures we did on this piece here, you know, where you got the single 45-degree bevel cuts on the inside lines, and then you got the nice shallow bevel cut on the edges that's going to need to be cut and then sanded nice and straight. Alright, I finished up the bottom plate rear portion of the main wing. I did all the bevel cuts the same process that we did the front portion. So we got a real shallow bevel cut here, 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 and here. Then we got 45-degree bevel cuts in there and in there. Then we just cut out the slots. This is going to be where the thrust tube support piece goes later. But first, now what we're going to do is we're going to glue, hot glue, the front and back pieces together like this, and that'll pretty much make the whole bottom plate of the rear wing, of the main wing. Right, next up, after finishing the bottom wing plate, we're going to move up to the riser 1 plate. There's a right and left side on that. So basically you're just going to cut these out. They're simple straight cuts, nothing special. Just use a straight edge, try and be as straight as you can, cut them out, then you glue the two halves together. Alright guys, I got the riser plate 1, 2 halves hot glued together. So, and it's all ready to go. So now I'm going to move on to riser plate 2, cut it out, and get it ready. This one's again very easy. It's all straight cuts, nothing special. So I'm going to cut it out and then we'll go from there. Okay guys, I got riser plate number 2. It's all cut out. It's fairly easy. It's just all straight cuts. So now that I got it ready, I'm going to take riser plate 1 that we already did, and I'm just going to use some 5mm epoxy. I'm going to put it in between, glue it together, and get it ready to glue to the bottom plate. Okay, we now have riser plate 1 and riser plate 2 epoxy together, so they're nice and secure. So I'm just going to set that to the side now, and we're going to start cutting out the main wing piece. There's 3 pieces. You got the front piece, then the 2 pieces that go on the back. We'll cut those out, and these glue all together to form the top of the main wing. Alright, I got the 2 back halves of the main wing cut out. Simple straight cuts all the way around. And you got a notch on the back that'll be where part of the fuselage glues into later. But the elevons, you're going to cut on the back side. Just cut a single 45-degree cut, you know, and then make sure it bends nice and easy. Then usually what I'll do is I'll just run a bead of hot glue down this opening, and this will kind of create like a hot glue hinge, make it stronger and hold things together. So just run the hot glue in there. And just take a spare piece of foam board and just kind of wipe it down so it just creates a thin layer of hot glue within that groove. Then just basically let it dry, and it'll be flexible, but it'll also be stronger and hold it together, and help keep it from separating out the foam board later. Okay, I have all 3 pieces of the main wing, the top portion, all glued together. So now we're going to take the 2 riser pieces that are already glued together, and we're going to epoxy it with the 5-minute epoxy down like this on top of the main wing portion. This is basically the bottom side of the main wing. Just make sure you align all the notches and stuff like that. Make sure it's all aligned before you set it with the epoxy. Once you got it all good, you can just epoxy it down and it'll be ready to glue on the very bottom plate after we get this glued together. Okay guys, we now have the top of the main wing and the riser 1, riser 2 plates all glued together. So now it's ready to glue on the bottom plate of the main wing. Basically you can just kind of do a test fit to see where you need to align it. So basically you just take it all the way to the front and make sure the nose lines up, and then push down on these sides, make sure they align, and see everything's fitting okay. So basically after you get it checked, you're just going to put some epoxy, 5-minute epoxy around the edges of here, then put the bottom plate on and glue it on. Usually I'll put some sort of weight on there while it's drying and get it to do a nice fit. We won't glue the edges yet. That'll be the next step after we glue the bottom plate to the rest of the main wing. Alright, we now have the bottom plate glued to the rest of the main wing. So next we need to glue down the side. So I'm going to be using again some 5-minute epoxy. I'm going to bend this side up a little bit to get underneath it. And I'm going to run the epoxy under here. Then I'm going to push this down, and then I've got the blue masking tape, and I'm just going to close it up over the side to hold it down while the epoxy dries. You want to get the epoxy nice and evenly spread all the way down this leading edge, so you make sure the main wing is glued together good and air won't get in there and try and separate it back out. So let me epoxy that down, I'll tape it up, and then I'll show you what it looks like. Okay guys, I'm not sure if you can see this very well, but I got the epoxy now set on this bottom side. So I'm just going to push the bottom plate edge here, and then I'm just going to start pulling the masking tape up, the blue masking tape, to hold it down and hopefully get that edge to close up nicely and let the epoxy dry. Okay guys, I got the masking tape all closed up and we're letting the epoxy dry on this side. Basically you're going to want to do that same procedure for all these edges. You got the 2 on the back and then the other one on the side. And then eventually when we put the small pieces in here, you'll do the same procedure here. Okay guys, while the main wing is drying, I'm letting the epoxy dry on these leading edges. I'm going to cut out the 2 little triangular pieces that fit on the back of the base plate of the main wing. So those will cut out and they're going to fit right in here. This does have that shallow bevel cut on the back edge, and then just normal 45-degree bevel cuts around the top and the side edge here. Alright, here's what the 2 little back pieces look like. This is when it's just initially cut. It still needs to put the 45-degree bevel cuts around the top edges and this side edge. And then this back piece here, this will peel off the foam board, and then you'll put the nice shallow bevel cut. So basically when it's all done, it'll look like this. And you don't need to put a bevel cut in this middle cut here, because this is going to actually bend the opposite way this time when it goes into the main wing. So basically they'll fit into the bottom of the main wing like that. So let me finish this one up, and then these, since they're not super critical, I'm just going to hot glue them with the hot glue gun into place, and it'll be nice, quick, and easy to do it that way. Alright guys, I got the 2 little triangular pieces on the bottom plate of the main wing glued in now. So pretty much the bottom of the main wing is done. It's time to flip it over, and we're going to cut out the 2 KF airfoil pieces. These are pretty simple pieces to cut out. They're just straight cuts all the way around, and then there's going to be a beveled leading edge on each side of the KF airfoil. So we're going to cut that little line here, pull off the paper, and try and get a nice even, about a 45-degree bevel cut on there. So you want to sand it so it's pretty much even all the way down, instead of sometimes if you cut it with a knife it'll be a little bit wavy. So we want to keep that as uniform as possible when we do that cut. Alright, I have the 2 KF airfoil pieces all cut out. I cut the 45-degree bevel cut, then I went with the sanding block and made it nice and smooth and all even. So it's ready to use the 5-minute epoxy to glue to the main wing. So these just glue on each side of the main wing on top, and this, if you can look, there's a little bit of a notch on this corner that'll line up with the notch on the back corner. So when you glue it, that's where you want to line it up, and it just glues on like that. And again, I'll use a 5-minute epoxy because it goes on nice and smooth and level, and hopefully get it to seal nice and evenly all the way across the leading edge of the main wing, so the air won't get under it and, you know, ruin it when it's in flight. Anyway, let me get that epoxied on there, and then we'll continue on with the build. Basically, that's going to be the last portions of the main wing, and then we'll start getting into cutting out the fuselage pieces and the EDF mounting pieces. Okay guys, the main wing is pretty much done. The KF airfoil pieces are nice and secure, and the epoxy is dried. So now we can move on to the next step, which is starting to cut out the pieces for the EDF mount and also bulkhead 1 pieces. Okay, first up, we're going to start working on the main fuselage bulkhead 1. This is the main bulkhead that helps hold the shape of the whole fuselage with all the angles and stuff like that. It's pretty straightforward. This is all straight cuts, and then you just have a couple arch cuts in these pieces here. There's a bulkhead brace since it gets really thin up in the middle, so I just wanted to double up with the foam board and make it a little bit stronger. Okay guys, I've got bulkhead 1 all completed. You get the bulkhead brace epoxied on top, so it's nice and secure, and it's definitely more rigid and stronger. So next thing you want to do is do a test fit on the main wing. Make sure it fits in the slots. And the thing you want to check is you want to make sure the bottom edge is flush all the way down and meets up with the bottom plate, and also the edge over here of the top of the notch should be level with the main wing top portion there. If it's not, you may need to trim a tiny bit off, but try not to change this edge here, because that'll change the way it lines up with the top of the fuselage. If you need to trim just off the bottom of this edge here. The main reason for that is because some of the foam board manufacturers might have a tiny bit different thicknesses, might not be exactly the same as what I designed to. The foam board here I designed to is roughly 3/16 of an inch thick, so I did the calculations for 3 layers of foam board. So if you do need to adjust, just trim it, but try not to change from this angle here or this flat surface here on up, because that's what lines up with the fuselage once you put the top fuselage on. But anyway, looks like mine lines up nicely, so I'm just going to hot glue it in place. Just run some hot glue along the bottom edges. Oh, my glue stick is falling out. Okay, and I'm going to put it where the bulkhead brace is towards the back. Slide that sucker in. Push it in, make sure everything's as level and this is perpendicular to the wing as possible. Hold it till it dries, and then you should be good for the next step. Okay guys, we've got bulkhead 1 now glued into the main wing. So next we're going to start working on the EDF mounts. There's 2 pieces to the EDF mount. Basically you got the main piece, and then this stiffener will make it double wide or double thick to make it stronger for the EDF. So usually what I do is I cut out the hole first thing before I cut out everything else. And you want to verify the size of your EDF. Not all of them are exactly the same diameter. Mine was roughly a little over 53 millimeters diameter. I measured it from the center to the edge with the compass, and I'm going to actually use the compass to do the hole in these 2 parts. So basically you just take the compass after you measure your EDF actual size, and you can just put this to the center. Just kind of double check, both sides, make sure you're in the center. Okay, looks like I'm a tiny bit off, got to go up. Once you get it where you want, check both sides. Okay, then you can just spin this around and it'll roughly cut in the hole for the EDF. You just got to do a few passes to get it to go through the paper and the foam board. But once you get it done, it makes a nice round circle. You can also use an X-Acto knife, but your circle won't be exactly round. Anyway, let me get this cut out and I'll show you what it looks like. Okay guys, I got the first hole pretty much cut out. And just do a double check with the EDF. Yeah, it fits in. That one is a little bit loose, so I might want to tighten it up just a little bit on the second one. But it looks like it worked, and that's a nice round cut. I just picked up a cheap compass at Walmart for like $6. You can probably find them online at Amazon or any other place too. So find the ones with the metal tips, and it'll cut right through the foam board pretty easy. Okay guys, I got both of the motor mount pieces or EDF mount pieces cut out. This is EDF mount piece 1. There's two double 45-degree cuts here. We're gonna run some hot glue and put these at 90 degrees so they're perpendicular to the bottom there. And then this piece of glue in on top of that to make it double thick. So basically just like that. Okay, now that we got the EDF mounting piece all glued together, just do a dry test fit. Make sure everything fits. Basically should snap into place onto bulkhead 1 like that. After you get everything set and it clicks in there clean, then you can hot glue it in. You may have to do some tiny trim ups. That's what I had to do. So I'm not exactly accurate with all my cuts by hand. So I just had to trim up this bulkhead brace a little bit and a little bit on the notches. And then after that it fit nice and flush. So it's good to go. So now I'm just gonna hot glue it in place. Okay guys, we got the mount hot glued in place, and so I just did a test fit. This is the 50mm version. And I just test fit the EDF and it looks like everything fits okay. So we're getting ready to move on to the next step. Okay guys, I'm pretty happy with the way the EDF fits in there, so I'm just gonna put some hot glue around the outer edge of the EDF and then pull it into place, and that'll help hold it in to the foam board. Okay, I'm just going to spin it a little bit as I put it in. Okay, that should be it. The EDF's pretty much in place. I'll probably put a little bead of hot glue along the back to make sure it doesn't pull forward. And that's pretty much it. Your EDF's mounted in the plane. All right guys, now that we got the EDF mounted in the plane, I'm going to move on to the next part. That's the thrust tube support piece. It's pretty simple. It's just all straight cuts, and then you got two double 45-degree bevel cuts that allow the sides to fold up. Okay, I have the thrust tube support piece all cut out. It's just simple cuts all the way around, and then double 45-degree cut here, double 45-degree cut there. And these pieces will just go up like that, hot glue them in place, so that'll help support it and keep it upright. So let me just hot glue that now. It's just super simple. Okay guys, we have the thrust tube support piece test fit in here. Made sure it fits in the slots good, so now I'm just going to hot glue it in. So take it back out, put some hot glue on there. Okay, and then that just glues in here. The little hole in the back here, that's a little bit smaller than the diameter of the EDF, because your thrust tube should come down at a little bit of an angle and get smaller as it goes towards the back. Okay guys, I made a simple thrust tube out of the scrap cardstock that I had available. I had to put two pieces together to make it work, but it's just a simple tube made out of cardstock, and that's going to slide on here. Okay, and then you'll fit it on the motor. You know, get it lined up. You know, it should be straight, and then it should be slightly reducing as it goes back, and it should fit nice and flushly against that thrust tube support right here. So I'm just going to hot glue the thrust tube. I'm going to put some hot glue on the back of this thrust tube support, and then I'll just tape it to the front of the EDF. Okay guys, the thrust tube is nice and secure. It's hot glued in the back and taped on the front to the EDF. So now we'll move on to the next step. Okay guys, we're moving on to cutting out the next piece. The next piece we're going to work on is the front fuselage piece. This is going to be mounted to the main wing after it gets cut out. There are a lot of double 45-degree bevel cuts, so before you start cutting, kind of take a look and realize where you got to cut, especially the center lines. Those what mark your double 45-degree cuts. So I usually cut those only through one side of the foam board, and then you come back with your 45-degree bevel cutter or X-Acto knife if you're doing it the hard way. So let me get it cut out and I'll show you what it looks like when I have all the bevel cuts in it and it's ready to go. Okay, we got the front fuselage piece pretty much all cut out with the minor cuts. I marked where all the 45-degree bevel cuts will go with the center lines. So now I'm just going to take the 45-degree bevel cutter, and first I'm going to do a single 45-degree bevel cut across the top lines and the bottom lines, and then we'll cut out the double 45-degree cuts for all the folds for the fuselage. Okay guys, I got the front fuselage piece. I got all the 45-degree bevel cuts put into the piece so it'll fold nicely. So what you want to do is kind of fold it at each point to make sure it puts a nice crease on the other side so you can see the angles of the fuselage. This little area you want to cut all the way through on this one fold because it's not a straight line for the fold there, so that'll give it little area for it to fold more easily. Then you just hot glue it after you get it folded in shape when you do your test fit on the plane on the main wing. One optional thing you can do that I like to do is I take some of the scrap foam board, I cut pieces to double up this little piece right here because it can be a little bit weak since it's a small skinny piece. So I just take some scrap foam board and I'm going to hot glue right on top of it like that. This will be on the inside of the plane. Don't go all the way to the bottom because this is going to be at an angle also. So keep it a little bit smaller than that piece, but about that size, and that'll make this area of the fuselage a little bit stronger. So I'm just going to hot glue that on both sides. And again, this is optional, but like I said, it's just something to make it a little bit stronger. Okay guys, after you get the front fuselage piece all cut out and ready, you want to do a test fit on the plane and kind of hold these little side vents here at the proper angle so you can get those set so they line up with the plane. So I put some hot glue in there and I held it down in place, just so those are at the right angle there. And then next you're going to want to run some hot glue through all these double 45-degree bevel cuts and kind of do the same thing and hold it in the right position on top of the plane so it's held nice and strongly in the right form. Okay guys, I got the hot glue in each of these cuts inside and it's now held in place, so I can take it off. We're just going to take it off and put it to the side. So as you can see, it's held in a nice shape and it's ready to glue on the plane later. And we're not going to glue it on now so we can have easy access to put the electronics in and kind of figure out where everything will go to get our nice proper balance in CG. Once we get all the electronics in, then later we can glue this piece on to the main wing. So now we'll get on to carving kind of the most complicated piece. That's going to be the top fuselage piece. This has the most double 45-degree bevel cuts and folds in it. So let me start cutting it out, and then we'll kind of show you the example of what it looks like when you get the basic cuts in. First, you're going to put in all the center lines for the double 45-degree bevel cuts, and then after that, you go with the 45-degree bevel cut tool and then cut in all these double 45-degree bevel cuts, and then do some folds to make some nice creases in the top of the fuselage so it takes its shape. Alright, I have the upper fuselage piece all cut out, and I put all the center lines for the 45-degree bevel cuts all throughout the part. This again is probably the most complicated piece of the plane, because of all the double 45-degree bevel cuts. So first thing, I'm going to take my 45-degree bevel cutter and pretty much do a single 45-degree bevel cut all the way around the whole perimeter of this part, and then I'll come in on all the center lines that I cut and then do double 45-degree bevel cuts so this thing can fold up, pretty much almost like origami, and take shape. So let me get all the 45-degree bevel cuts put into this part and I'll show you what it looks like. Okay guys, I got the top fuselage all pretty much cut out now. I got all the double 45-degree bevel cuts pretty much on all the fold lines. So next thing you want to do is go at each fold line and kind of fold it a little bit to put a nice crease on the outside of the fuselage so you can see the lines of the fuselage. Okay, after you get that all done, what you're going to want to do is start hot gluing, these edges together on the front of the fuselage where these two pieces meet up, and do the same on the back. So hot glue those, and then after that we'll put in the bulkhead 2 piece that will go right about here, and that'll help hold the shape of the angle of the fuselage like that. So let me start hot gluing these edges like I said, and then I'll show you what it looks like. Okay guys, the upper fuselage piece is pretty much done. I've got bulkhead 2 hot glued into place. That'll help hold the shape of the main top of the fuselage, and I did run hot glue through all these double 45-degree bevel cuts to help hold it in shape and make it a little stronger. So after you get that all done, you can just do your test fit and see how everything lines up. So it looks like everything's pretty much fitting in. Once you hot glue it in place, it'll definitely take shape and be good on the plane. Okay guys, the next piece I'm going to cut out is a thrust tube cover. This is a pretty basic piece. It's just straight cuts around the perimeter. You got 3 double 45-degree bevel cuts on the fold lines, and you got a shallow bevel cut that goes across these 2 little parts that go up and meet up on the plane. Okay guys, I got the thrust tube cover all cut out, and I got the bevel cuts cut into it, and I put the shallow bevel cuts up towards the front of these notches here, and then there's a small single 45-degree bevel cut here, so these parts can fold. And then after you get it all cut out, what you're going to want to do is do a test fit on the plane, okay, and run some beads of hot glue down these double 45-degree bevel cuts and kind of get it held into shape until the hot glue dries, and that'll help keep it in form once you put it into plane. And then you also have to put some hot glue down where these 2 little notches come up and meet too, like that. Okay guys, I got the thrust tube cover all pretty much hot glued into shape, so it's now taking form and it's ready to do the final glue in once we get it ready to put on the plane. So next up, we're going to move on to cutting out the nose piece. This is just a very simple piece to cut out. It's just straight cuts all the way around, and then you'll do a single 45-degree bevel cut all the way around the perimeter, and it's got a single line that goes down the middle with the double 45-degree bevel cut, so you can fold the nose up to fit on the front of the plane. Okay guys, got the nose piece all cut out. Got the single 45-degree bevel cut all the way around the perimeter. Make sure you do a nice job on when you cut the 45-degree bevel cut, because that's going to make it line up more flushly with the front of the plane when you get ready to glue it on later. The last parts we have to cut out are the 2 tail fins, are the vertical stabilizers. Usually what I like to do is I like to get the better foam board for these. I usually get like the Elmer's brand, or Hobby Lobby brand or something like that. That's a little bit stronger and won't flex as easy, because the Dollar Tree foam board is really light, but it can bend a little bit too easy, or sometimes it's even a little bit warped. If you get the better premium brand foam board, it's usually really nice and straight, and it works great for doing the vertical stabilizers. So these are very easy parts to cut out. They're just straight cuts. So we're just kind of cut those out and put them to the side for now, and then we'll get started on putting the electronics in the plane. Okay guys, that's the last of the parts we have to cut out for the plane. Here's the vertical stabilizers. Again, like I said, this is with that premium foam board. It's a lot stiffer and should be more resilient and last a little longer, not bend as easy as the Dollar Tree foam board. So we'll put these parts aside, and we're going to take the plane and take off the fuselage and start putting in the rest of the electronics. Okay guys, actually I decided to glue on the front part of the fuselage already, so that's already glued on, but we still have access to be able to get to where we need to go to put in the rest of the electronics. Most of it actually is probably going to go in the back half of the plane anyway. I think I'm going to put my ESC and receiver back here to keep some of the weight towards the back, so it'll be easier to get the proper CG and balance with the battery. So let me get the servos, and we'll start putting those into the main wing, where we're just going to cut little slots inside the KF airfoil areas and embed them into the wing. This plane is just going to require 2 servos. I usually like to use between 9 to 12 gram metal gear servos. They're a little more durable than the plastic gear servos. You can use plastic gear if that's all you have, but again, like I said, I like to use the metal gear. They're a little more durable but they are a little bit more heavy, but not too bad. Like I said, they're only between 9 to 12 grams. These ones I have here are 12-gram servos, so we'll take them out and get them ready to install on the plane. So I got the right servo pretty much placed in the wing. What you want to do is just pick where you want to install it, and then trace around it with a pin, and then cut out a little slot in the KF airfoil so the servo will fit in it, and then we're just going to hot glue it into space here. Okay, a little hot glue in there, might be too much, but okay. So that's all you got to do to mount the servos. And what I usually do is I just cut a line in the KF airfoil to slide the wiring for the servo in. So this is going to run all the way into where the fuselage will be installed later. So you just cut a line, then I usually just push it in a little bit with a screwdriver, and then I can put the wire in there and embed it so it's, you know, pretty much all the way embedded. It's not sticking out at all, and it's nice and flush with the top of the KF airfoil. Okay guys, here's a view of the plane. I now have all the electronics installed in it. I put the ESC on this side. I had to run the EDF wires outside of the thrust tube, so I cut a hole and pulled the wires out and then taped it back up. This is a 60 amp ESC. It's a little bit bigger than you need for the 50mm EDF. Probably a 30 or 40 amp ESC would be big enough, but this is the one I had on hand, so that's what I used. The receiver is mounted on this side of the plane. I had short cable, so I had to kind of scrunch everything together to get it to fit, but I have the two antennas separated out to give diversity. The servos are now connected to the receiver, and everything's set up with the mixing. You can see the servos moving there. So it's elevator and aileron controls combined on the two control surfaces. So all I have to do is put the control rods to the elevons, and then they'll be set up. So everything is tested out. My motor does, our EDF is all connected. I'm ensured it's blowing out the right way. So now it's ready to put the top of the fuselage on and hot glue it in place. Okay guys, this build video is also for the 70mm plane, and this is a look at the 70mm plane's electronics. Pretty much, you know, the whole build is exactly like doing the 50mm build. It's just a little bit larger. Same two servos. I've got the receiver mounted in the back of the plane with the diversity antennas mounted back here. I'm trying to put as much weight towards the back as I can so I can balance the plane. This plane has a 70mm 6S EDF, so it'll be harder to get the center of gravity with the balance of the bigger battery. So there's the battery I'll be using. It's a 3000 milliamp 100C 6S battery, and I have again the Turnigy K-Force 100 amp ESC mounted also in the back. So like I said, it's pretty much the same setup as the smaller plane. So if you just follow the smaller plane's build video for the bigger plane, it should be good enough to get you through the build. Like I said, it's just sized up from 24 inches for the small build for the wingspan. This one's a 29-inch wingspan, but otherwise all the parts and assemblies is exactly the same. Okay guys, that's just a quick look at the electronics. Let's get to finishing up the build of the 50mm. Okay, real quick, before I glue the top of the fuselage on, I just marked little areas where I'm going to cut little tiny notches for the servo wires to go through easily without being scrunched too much by the top of the fuselage. Okay guys, I got the top of the fuselage all glued down to the main wing. So now I'm going to glue on the thrust tube cover. Basically that just slides on in the back here like that, and we'll hot glue it to the plane. Okay, the thrust tube cover is now hot glued into the plane, so that's all ready to go. And now I moved on and I cut in the hatch for the plane. Basically after you hot glue the top of the fuselage on, that's when you want to cut the hatch. Usually I put hot glue towards the front of the top of the fuselage, but leave it unglued from about this section to that section. So when you cut the hatch, you can just pull it off. And on the hatch right now, I just glued on some spare pieces of foam board to hook underneath the front of the plane. So it's going to go in like that. And then I will add a magnet here in a little while to help hold the hatch down, and I'll put a little handle on here that I 3D printed and then it'll be nice and ready to go. Alright guys, I've got the control rods all connected to the elevons on both sides, so it's pretty much ready to go. The last thing I got to do is hot glue on the vertical stabilizers and put on the decals. The decals usually I print to some sort of Avery label or something like this. It's like a sticker label. This comes in an 8.5 by 11 size. You can find these at Walmart or online. But anyway, I just print them out on those, and then you just cut them out and stick them to the plane. Okay guys, the 50mm EDF build for the F-117 V2 is pretty much complete. I've got all the decals on. I've even added a couple extra decals in the set. You got the little thing on the front, the ejection seat decal, and then the other decals that I already had in the old prop version of the plane. The last thing you need to do before flight is make sure you get your center of gravity or the balance of the plane set. You can get this by measuring 17.5 inches back from the nose along the wing, and I put marks on both sides of the wing. Then just hold it on your fingertips with everything in the plane with your battery and make sure it balances on that point. You might need to move your battery forward or back, or even if necessary you might have to add a little bit of weight, you know, to the front and the back of the plane to get it to balance. But this is very important to get your center of gravity balance correct. Otherwise the plane won't fly right. It can, you know, if it's tail heavy, it's very hard to fly at all. If it's nose heavy, it makes it very super reactive in how it acts. So that's one of the most critical things, is getting your center of gravity correct. So we got everything set. So basically it's going to be going out to the field to test fly this plane. But anyway, that'll pretty much finish up the build video for this new FF-117 V2 EDF version for the 50mm and 70mm planes. Thanks for watching.